Good evening, guys and gals, and welcome to Gather and Geek. On tonight's episode of Forget the Rules, we're covering one of the hottest new TCGs on the market, Elestrals. Created and published by Dan Clapp, better known to his YouTube subscribers as A-Drive, Elestrals borrows some of its mechanics from the heavyweights of the trading card game genre while mixing in a few new features that make it all its own. This keeps the game spicy and exciting for new players, but lends a little bit of familiarity to the seasoned card slinger. So, if you're like us and you've been itching to check out this new game but you don't know how to play yet, or maybe you just need a little bit of a rules refresher before your next game of Elestrals, you can go ahead and leave your copy of the rulebook at home and leave the heavy lifting to us. It's time to gather around and geek out. Let's learn Elestrals. So today, we're covering a game that I've been itching to get my hands on. But before we can do that, we must first appease our YouTube overlords. As such, I'll implore you to click the little like button for this video, and if you want to come back and hang out with us again in the future, click the subscribe button as well. Doesn't cost you a single thing except the time it takes to click the buttons, and it really does help us more than you'd believe. And for that, we appreciate you. Now, back to the task at hand. What is Elestrals? Elestrals is a TCG, or a trading card game for the uninitiated, that sees the ancient pantheon of gods doing battle with one another. However, instead of diving directly into conflicts themselves, these ancient deities have sent forth their followers, us, who they've named casters, to do battle on their behalf. As a caster, we'll be channeling ancient spirits in order to pay for the summoning of powerful creatures, which are called, you guessed it, Elestrals. Casters will use these Elestrals in a variety of different ways, with the ultimate goal of depleting your opponent's resources until they can no longer channel enough spirits to pay for their cards. Now that you've got the gist, let's dig into the finer details. We'll start by setting up the battlefield. The game is played in a grid of 12 spaces in a 6x2 formation. Place your main deck of cards face down in the bottom right corner and your spirit deck in the bottom left. Your main deck must be exactly 40 cards, and your spirit deck has to be 20 cards, no more, no less. The space directly above your main deck in the top right corner of your play space is your underworld. The underworld functions just like other trading card games' graveyards or discard piles, just with a cooler name. Basically, it's where all your cards go after you've played them. The center 4 spaces in the upper row of your play space are where your Elestrals go. Note that you've only got 4 spaces there, so you're limited in how many Elestrals you can have in play at one time. 4 spaces underneath the Elestral zones in the center of the back row are where your runes are played. Again, note that you've only got 4 spaces to work with, so don't fill them all up by mistake. The final spot on your game board, the one in the top left corner, is your stadium zone, but more on that later. Now that we know where everything goes, let's take a look at some of the cards. The most important type of card in Elestrals are your spirits. Your spirit deck is comprised of exactly 20 spirits arranged in any combination of the 8 types that you'd like. These are the resources that you'll use to pay for the cards you play each turn. But be careful. If you run your spirit deck so low that you no longer have spirits to expend, it's game over and you lose. The main deck is broken up into 2 types of cards, Elestrals and runes. Elestrals are the creatures that you'll be battling each other with, and the runes are everything else. You can easily identify that a card is an Elestral because it will have an attack stat and a defense stat printed on it, while your runes simply won't have either of these numbers. In the bottom right corner of the card, you'll find a few small symbols. These symbols indicate which subclass of cards the Elestral falls into. However, at the time of this recording, subclasses aren't really all that important in the game. So I'd say don't worry too much about it unless your card specifically mentions them. Lastly, but perhaps most importantly, the cost to play each of your cards is located in the center of the card right here. Let's start out by playing an Elestral first. To cast an Elestral, you start by placing the Elestral card from your hand onto the battlefield in one of your designated Elestral zones. You choose whether to place the Elestral in attack mode, which is the vertical orientation, or in defense mode, the horizontal orientation. As compared to some games where your creatures have a power and a health, which both play a part in combat between cards, this game simply cares about the number that corresponds to the position of the card on the battlefield. So when a card is in attack mode, don't worry about its defense stat, and vice versa. You can change each of your Elestrals' battle positions once each turn, but not on the same turn that they were cast. So make sure you choose the correct position when you place them onto the field, because they're going to be stuck that way for the whole turn. After placing the Elestral onto the battlefield, search through your spirit deck and find the corresponding type of spirit to enchant the card with, placing it underneath the Elestral, like so. Note that if you don't have the correct type of spirits left in your spirit deck, you can still cast an Elestral. However, an Elestral that has the wrong type of spirits underneath it is considered misenchanted, and despite still having its printed attack and defense values, a misenchanted Elestral loses any effect it may have. Now, some Elestrals cost more than one spirit to play. However, you can't just pay 2 or 3 spirits and slap that bad boy onto the field. No sir, these more expensive Elestrals can only be summoned via a mechanic called Ascension. To perform an Ascension, first choose the Elestral that you want to play from your hand, and then choose one of your Elestrals that are already in play. Next, add 1 spirit from your spirit deck to the Elestral on the field, and replace that Elestral with the one from your hand, leaving the spirits behind and effectively transferring them from the old card onto the new one. If you'd like to add even more spirits to your new card, you can move spirits from your other in-play Elestrals over to the Ascended card at this time. Once this process is complete, if the new Elestral has at least the number of spirits underneath it as its printed cost, then you're all done. Ascension complete. A few things to note before we move on. When ascending an Elestral, the card you're ascending into doesn't have to be a 2 or 3 cost card. You can absolutely ascend one of your in-play Elestrals into a 1 cost Elestral from your hand as a way to get extra spirits onto that new card. Another way to get extra spirits onto one of your Elestrals is by re-enchanting. If you already have an Elestral in play, instead of playing a new Elestral for the turn, you can instead choose to re-enchant it by adding another spirit from your spirit deck to that in-play Elestral. A lot of Elestrals have effects that trigger when they receive certain types of spirits, so this is a way to re-trigger those effects, as well as helping you set up for bigger Ascension plays on future turns. Lastly, because you can only normal cast, normal ascend, or re-enchant 1 time per turn, make sure you use discretion when deciding to do so. However, some cards will have effects that allow you to special cast or special ascend your Elestrals, and these don't have that once per turn restriction. You also have the option to expend 1 spirit from your spirit deck to draw another card from your main deck. However, this is done in lieu of using your normal cast, normal ascend, or re-enchant for the turn. Only think of it kind of like a consolation prize for a turn that otherwise didn't really have much going on. So those were the Elestrals. Now, for the other cards, your runes. There are 5 types of runes in the game, and they all function a little differently. You can tell which type of rune you're dealing with by the identifying icon printed where you would normally find the attack and defense stats of an Elestral. The first type of runes we'll discuss are the all-powerful Divine Runes. Divine Runes represent one of the great deities giving direct aid to you. You pay for the Divine Runes same as you would in Elestral by placing spirits from your spirit deck underneath the card and then placing it face up into one of your rune zones. Divine Runes remain on the field for as long as they have spirits enchanting them, allowing you to use their powerful effects turn after turn. Next are Artifact Runes. Artifacts are weapons or boons or power-ups that you can equip your in-play Elestrals with. Again, just like all the other cards we've discussed thus far, you pay for artifacts by placing spirits from your spirit deck underneath the card equal to its cost. Then, just place the artifact into your rune row and designate which Elestral you're empowering with it. And honestly, that's all there is to it. Next up are Stadium Runes, which, if you remember, have their own designated space on the battlefield. And that's because only 1 stadium can be in play at a time. That means if one player already has a stadium in play when the other player casts theirs, the first stadium will be sent to the underworld, so be careful. The fourth type of runes are Invoke Runes. These runes are cast just like all of the others, but they only provide a one-time effect and then are sent right off to the underworld. Despite their fleeting existence, you still have to have an open rune zone to cast an Invoke Rune, so it's important to remember to leave yourself enough space to do so. Lastly is my favorite type of runes. They're called counter runes. Counter runes are unique because they first must be set face down into your rune row. Then, starting on your opponent's turn, you can flip up and activate the counter rune in response to one of your opponent's cards, causing what's known as a chain. The first link in the chain is the card or effect that your opponent played. The second link is your counter rune. From there, players take turns adding links to the chain until both players are satisfied and no longer wish to add any further cards. At that point, the chain is closed. The closed chain then resolves backwards in a last in, first out style, with the last played card resolving first, all the way back to the final card to resolve being the opponent's card or effect that started the whole thing. Counter runes are also great because you pay for them when you flip them face up, not when you're setting them into your rune row. And here's something that I find really neat about invoke runes and counter runes. When you cast these two specific types of runes, you can choose to expend spirits from around your battlefield instead of from your spirit deck to pay for them. Pretty cool, right? So even if your spirit deck is starting to get dangerously low, you can still throw an invoke or a counter at your opponent by using the spirits from under your divine rune, your stadium, or your Elestrals like one last-ditch haymaker. But be warned, if you remove spirits from one of your cards and it leaves that card with less spirits than its printed cost, that card is sent to the underworld at the end of the current chain. Side note, with runes, unlike with your Elestrals, there is no restriction for 2 or 3 cost cards, so you just pay the entire cost to play the rune all at once, however much that is. The last thing we need to cover from a cards standpoint is a mechanic called Nexusing. This isn't a mechanic you can just do anytime, however. In fact, you can only perform a Nexus whenever one of your cards specifically instructs you to do so. To Nexus, choose one of your cards that are in play. Next, choose how many spirits you want to remove from underneath that card. Then, pick a different card that you have in play to receive those spirits and just slide them on over. This is a really crafty way to redistribute your spirits throughout your field, and to trigger certain cards whose effects occur when they receive spirits. But again, be careful, because if you remove so many spirits from a card that it is no longer enchanted with at least as many spirits as its cost, that card's headed off to the underworld. Okay, so now you know how to play all the different types of cards and how to activate some really cool effects. But when do you do each of those things? That's a really great question. Let's walk you through it. The game begins with each player shuffling their main deck and then drawing 5 cards. If you don't like your starting hand, you can shuffle it back into your deck and draw 5 new cards. But if you decide to mulligan in this way, you will have to send 2 spirits from your spirit deck to the underworld as payment. You can pay this mulligan cost as many times as you want until you have a playable hand, but I'd highly advise against doing it any more than once or twice. That's just too many spirits to lose before the game has even begun. A typical turn begins with your adequately named draw phase, where you draw 1 card from your main deck and add it to your hand. The player who takes the very first turn of the game skips this draw. Next up is your main phase, where you can cast, ascend, or re-enchant your Elestral for the turn, or if you don't want to do any of those things, you can expend 1 spirit from your spirit deck to draw a card from your main deck. You can also play or set any number of runes or activate any of the effects you have on the field, as well as change the battle position of any Elestrals you already had in play. There is no specific order that you have to adhere to when activating cards during the main phase, and sometimes doing them in a creative order will have strategic benefits. So, go nuts and experiment a little bit. Once you're done playing all the cards that you'd like, it's time to move on to the battle phase. Note that the player who takes the very first turn of the game doesn't get the opportunity to perform combat on their opening turn. During the battle phase, you'll be using your Elestrals to try to clear away your opponent's Elestrals and deal damage to your opponent's spirit deck. Only Elestrals that are in the attack position can declare an attack during the battle phase. If your opponent has no Elestrals in play, you can use your Elestrals to attack their spirit deck directly. When one of these attacks connects, it deals damage equal to the number of enchanting spirits underneath the attacking Elestral. The damaged player expresses that damage by sending spirits from their spirit deck to the underworld equal to the damage that was dealt. However, if your opponent has any Elestrals in play, you must first attack those Elestrals before you can deal any damage directly to their spirit deck. To do so, you start by choosing one of your attack position Elestrals as the attacker. Then, choose one of your opponent's Elestrals as the attack target. If your attacking Elestral battles an opponent's Elestral who is in attack position, compare the attack stats of each card. If one is higher than the other, destroy the weaker card. In the event of a tie, both cards are destroyed and sent to the underworld. If a destroyed Elestral had fewer enchanting spirits than the other, its controller expends spirits equal to the difference, even if both were destroyed. If your attacking Elestral battles an opponent's Elestral who's in defense position, compare your Elestral's attack stat to the defense stat of that Elestral. If the attack stat's higher, the defending Elestral is destroyed. But, because it was in defense mode, no damage is dealt to the spirit deck. If the defending Elestral's defense stat is equal to or higher than the attacker's attack stat, nothing happens. No Elestrals are destroyed, no damage is dealt. Okay, so I know what you're asking yourself. How do I win? Well, it's really quite simple. If at any point your opponent would have to expend a spirit from their spirit deck and they don't have any left to expend, you win the game. The same is true if they have to draw a card from their main deck and there isn't one left for them to draw. That's game over and victory is yours. So, that's how you play Elestrals. And I am telling you, I cannot wait to sink my teeth into this game. If you'd like to see us do exactly that, you can check out the playthrough video for Elestrals that's available on our channel right now. There's a link in the description of this video, and the editor is also going to put like a little link over here. What do you think? Like right here? This is probably good. Yeah, here-ish. Click on either one of those links and it'll take you right over to that other video. How convenient, am I right? But before you go, if you've made it this far in the video and you haven't already, don't forget to hit us with a like and a subscribe, or leave a comment down below with what you did or didn't like about the video. You can also use the comment section to recommend some really cool games that you'd like to see us cover in the future, because we're always looking for new suggestions for cool games to check out. And last, but certainly not least, we've got a whole bunch of new content ready to drop over the coming days and weeks. So why don't you turn on notifications by ringing the little bell icon right down there, and that way you won't miss a single one of our videos when they're uploaded. Once you've done that, you can just sit back and relax and let us play the part of your one-stop shop for everything from TCGs to RPGs and all the beautiful games in between. That's it for today's episode, and I'm really glad you guys were along for the ride with us. From everybody here at Gather and Geek, until next time, GG.